Hey, what's going on, guys? I apologize for my recent hiatus. I actually got a yeast infection, so that was very painful. I couldn't talk. I had a lot of oral lesions and canker sores, so I was in a lot of pain, couldn't even talk. So that's why I haven't been keeping up to date with the new Miles Morales news, the new Gotham Knights news, anything like that. But today I wanted to talk a little bit about Gotham Knights and why I think that it's a game that's going to grow on people exponentially once it releases. Now, when this game was revealed at the DC Fandom event back in August, there were mixed reactions, to say the least. And I think that if you're in the Arkham community, there's gonna be a chance that you'll think that the reaction was largely negative. Now, having talked to a lot of friends who are less involved with the Arkham community than I am, and just by looking at the objective statistics of the like to dislike ratio, looking at the comments of these videos, the reaction is more positive than negative, but there is a very vocal minority of individuals, again, mostly from the Arkham community, who were very excited to see, an Arkham Origins sequel or a rebooted Batman game that still starred Bruce Wayne, and that's simply not what we're getting. Now, I gotta be 100% honest here and say that I am very happy that Warner Brothers Games Montreal is doing this. Because if they had come out and announced Arkham Uprising and said, it takes place between Origins and Asylum, I would have been excited, and we all would have been excited, and I don't think anyone would have really caused much backlash at that point. But my issue is that would have been very safe. And I guess that there's not really an issue with that. I would have played a new Batman Arkham game very heavily. I would have been very excited for that as well, but I am even more excited to see Gotham Knights. Now, that doesn't mean that I think it's going to be better than Arkham necessarily. I haven't played the game, so I can't tell you what my thoughts and opinions are, but I am more intrigued because if it was an Arkham Origins sequel, we'd know exactly what we were getting. It's a game that's going to take place in one night, the city's going to be evacuated or something, and it's gonna play and look a lot like Batman Arkham Knight, and it's gonna have a fairly safe story as to not step on Rocksteady's toes narratively, and it would have been a good, fine, safe game. But with Gotham Knights, there's a lot that we don't really know, and it's a brand new story. It's not connected to Arkham, so I think that it's going to be interesting, and it's going to be very freeing for Warner Brothers Games Montreal to be able to do their own stylistic take on this IP. What I mainly want to focus on here is the similarities and differences that I feel like we can expect from Rocksteady's take on Batman, or the Arkham games. And some of you may argue, well, Warner Brothers Games Montreal made Arkham Origins, so that should be taken into account. However, I feel like that is a little bit tricky to compare this game to, as Arkham Origins really was Warner Brothers Games Montreal really trying to match the style of Rocksteady. They were trying to make it feel as much like a Rocksteady game as possible, and really make it fit in that Arkham universe. And I like Arkham Origins as much as the next guy. I don't consider it underrated. I don't think it's the best one. I don't think it's a masterpiece like many people do. But I consider it a very solid Batman game. I play it at least once a year around Christmas. I love the Christmas setting. And I think that for the time they had and the resources they had and the mandate that they had, I think Warner Brothers Games Montreal actually pulled out something very impressive with Batman Arkham Origins, but I feel like Gotham Knights has the potential to be something even more than that. So having seen the trailer and a brief gameplay demo, which, to be fair, hasn't given us too much insight into this game, but it has given us an idea of what the mechanics are going to look like, how the game is going to play, let's start off by talking about the similarities to Arkham. Now, I think that this game is going to feel a lot more like the Arkham games than people realize. The traversal looks very similar, particularly for Batgirl, who can still glide around. The grappling hooks also look pretty much identical to the Arkham games, where it indicates to the player, like, the ledges that they can use the grappling hook on. They've announced that this game is going to have 5 boroughs of Gotham, so the city will be split into 5 sections. Now, fortunately, there will not be any level gating. In other words, you won't have to reach level 12 before you can visit the 3rd borough in Gotham, so that's going to be very exciting. And really, I think that being able to traverse around Gotham is going to feel very similar to how it did in particularly Arkham Knight. We now have the Bat bikes to drive around on, and what's comforting about this is that it would be very odd to make a tank mode for the Bat bikes And so the fact that we're not necessarily driving the Batmobile around, I think, will be a nice change of pace. Now, there are going to be some improvements, in my opinion, upon Arkham. For example, the city will now be populated. There will be citizens roaming the streets. This was a piece of the open world that started to feel a little bit outdated by the time Arkham Origins and Arkham Knight rolled around. It's like, where's the civilians? Where are the pedestrians? And yes, they had story reasons for them not being out. It just felt like they were really stretching it by those last two games. So it will be nice to feel like Gotham is lived in, and to really feel like the city that you're fighting for has stakes, and there are going to be major issues. For example, if you can't stop Mr. Freeze, real people are going to get hurt. That's going to add some extra stakes to the game. Additionally, I feel like Gotham, just in its size, it's bound to have a lot of things to do. There's going to be side missions, there's going to be collectibles, and even though these won't necessarily look the same as Arkham, for example, they probably won't have Riddler trophies. The side missions will probably be handled fairly differently here, but it will still evoke similarities to Arkham. They will still have those open world elements that we really liked about Arkham City and Arkham Knight. They'll just have, I guess, a different cosmetic, I guess is the word that you could use. They'll look different here. For example, rather than collecting Riddler trophies, you might be collecting materials to strengthen your suit or to create a new gadget, or the side missions might be a lot longer. One thing that we saw in that gameplay demo was that the Mr. Freeze mission appears to be a standalone side mission in the game that will be pretty lengthy and that will have a pretty significant place in this game's world. So I feel like there's going to be some improvements upon some of the ideas that were begun with the Arkham games. So I feel like Warner Brothers Games Montreal is going to take what Rocksteady did with side missions and collectibles and then just add perhaps a bit more relevance to them in this game. One other thing that I think is going to be more similar than people realize is the combat and the stealth. Now, they did remove free flow combat. That is something that we saw in the gameplay. It looks much more RPG-ish. However, I think that once you play it, it is going to feel a lot more like free flow than you recognize. Now, it doesn't look like they have a combo meter. It looks like the gadgets are utilized differently in this game. However, it's ultimately going to feel similar to Arkham or Spider-Man PS4, and that is something that we're going to have to see more of. But additionally, I think that the stealth is going to function largely the same as it did in Arkham. Once again, they'll have some new bells and whistles, and I think that the layout of these encounters are going to be vastly different. But I feel like us players who are very familiar with the Arkham mechanics are going to feel at home with this game. You got to remember that Warner Brothers Games Montreal spent a lot of years developing a game that was allegedly going to be much more similar to the Rocksteady games. So I feel like over the years, this team has been able to probably revolutionize their own take on the Batman combat and on the Batman stealth. And I think that it's going to feel, once again, familiar, but it's also going to be a complete overhaul. And so that's going to bring me into the differences. Stylistically, this game looks a lot different. It does not have the art style of the Arkham games, and I'm actually all for that. I think that my issue with Arkham Origins is largely that Warner Brothers Games Montreal wasn't really able to have too much creative freedom. I think that the fact that Warner Brothers Games Montreal and Patrick Redding, who's the creative director, looked at this product and said, let's not try to emulate Rocksteady, let's just do our own thing. I feel like that's going to lead to something that's far more genuine. Now, once again, you might not like it as much as Arkham, or you might like it a lot more. And I think that a lot more people are going to really fall in love with this game and these characters once they actually play it. But I all the time will see aspiring writers try to emulate Stephen King as a novelist, and it never really works. And with Batman Arkham Origins, there were a lot of pieces in that game that felt like they were trying really hard to emulate what Rocksteady had done in the past. And I even look at the IGN review, which largely criticized the game for being only almost as good as Arkham City. And I just think that Warner Brothers Games Montreal being able to express their take on the Batman mythology is going to be really cool. Another element that is going to be expanded upon greatly in this game is the Bat family. In Arkham Knight, we started seeing some dual play elements. We started having some encounters with the Bat family. But here it's 100% on the Bat family to carry this story. The inclusion of multiplayer here, I think, was actually handled very well. It doesn't infringe upon the single-player experience, so you can play through this entire game as you would a regular Arkham game. But, once you've beaten the game once, then you can go in with friends. You can replay these missions with some of these great villains. I can hop on with some of my friends, some of the Gotham Knights members, and we can create content of us going in with our respective builds of, whichever Bat Family characters we want. And that's going to be a lot of fun. And I actually look at the multiplayer and feel like that was probably a big reason that so much of this game is an overhaul from Arkham. The combat from Arkham would likely be very difficult to implement into multiplayer. However, by recreating the combat and making it much more fluid with multiplayer, I think that that's going to make that whole experience more solid. And the characters themselves will absolutely be great in this story. And even if the story doesn't work, or if it just doesn't gel, if this product isn't our cup of tea necessarily, I guarantee it's not going to be because of the characters. It's not going to be because Batman is dead. And I know that there's all the conspiracy theories of Bruce isn't actually dead, he'll come back. Heck, I did a video on it like a week ago or something. But with that said, regardless, this game will put the main focus on these four characters: Batgirl, Robin, Red Hood, and Nightwing. And I see a lot of people saying that they're just not as interested in these characters as Bruce Wayne, and my response to that is, of course you're not. They haven't gotten any mainstream attention since Batman and Robin from Joel Schumacher, which was not a good movie and not a good representation of the Bat Family. So my plea is genuinely just to give this game a chance. Now, I'm not saying go pre-order it as soon as the pre-orders drop, but don't judge it too harshly until you hear what critics are saying. I'll definitely give an honest opinion and an honest review. If I don't like it, I'm going to be 100% honest about that. But I feel like these characters have really great dynamics, and in many ways they are just as strong as Bruce Wayne, particularly Barbara Gordon, in my opinion. But I just think that these characters are going to grow on us a lot more, and I feel like the gameplay elements need to be given a chance. I understand the concern of it leaning very heavily into RPG territory, but I just don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing. I know myself and a lot of other people have been very vocal about wanting to see evolution in superhero games. I talk about it all the time, that as much as I love Spider-Man PS4 and Arkham Knight, the model itself is starting to feel a little outdated, of having this main, very scripted story and then having these set side missions. And then when you compare it to other games that are releasing, like the Red Dead games or the Last of Us games, and I mean, to be fair, Rockstar and Naughty Dog are on insanely high levels in the industry, but they've found ways to evolve their model as time has gone on. It works for some people, it doesn't work for others, but I'm not going to come out and directly criticize Warner Brothers Games Montreal for trying something different. Once again, if it doesn't work, I'll call them out on it, but I'm definitely willing to give them a chance. And to be quite honest, I am very sold on the premise of the game, the style of the game, and the gameplay mechanics look like they all have very solid potential as well. I really do not think that this game is going to be the disaster that a lot of skeptics are claiming it will be, and I actually think that there's a good chance that for many of us, it could actually be a better experience than the Arkham games, just based upon the execution. I think that it will very likely be as strong as the Arkham games, just in a very different style and in a very different way. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Please be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and we'll see you guys in the next one.